Hello, everybody. I wanted to, make a cerebral TV chat. Maybe it's kind of a review in a way of a recent limited series that I watched that has just really powerfully affected me and my life. And I'm just so upset. I want to talk about it because I don't know anybody that ever watched it. And maybe people out in YouTube land have in fact watched it too and can give me their opinion. Of course, I'm going to bring it back to me, as I will, because it's my channel. But I was struck so much that as I'm on this journey, they will be on the journey as well. And all of the stuff that I kind of envied in a way, I don't know if I envy anymore. But I've got my Ralph Lauren hat. Bought that from the Ralph Lauren personalization shop. Made it myself. What do you think? Haha. Check that action out. Yeah, I made it myself. I could have done different things with it if I wanted, but I just wanted something that looked elegant and awesome, because I've always wanted a Ralph Lauren hat, but I could never afford it. Back in the day when there's something called the Bay, the Hudson's Bay, they used to have a whole department store. We lament its passing, but they used to sell a lot of Ralph Lauren stuff, and I was po', so we didn't have the ability to do that because this hat was quite expensive. But I do now. So, and it was just so glorious, and I just wanted that life. I wanted that Ralph Lauren life, You find out, though, that you're the same person. It's so weird, and I think this has something to do with the show I want to talk about. You're still the same person, and that's good. That's not bad necessarily, but when I was super po, and I thought if I got wealthier, I would, I'd be different. No, it's like when you lose weight, you think you're going to be this totally different person, and no, you're still the same person. It's just you've lost weight, because I've had that ability too. I was very, very big, well, for my size, which is quite petite. And now I'm not doing too badly. And yeah, you're still the same person. So anyway, on that note, I want to talk about the Chrisleys. Chrisleys Back to Reality. Don't know if anybody watched it. Don't know if anybody ever watched Chrisley Knows Best. God, I love that show. As you know, I thought I was Southern in another life. I could not get enough of Todd. What an absolute delight. God, what a wonderful man. He just makes you feel better. Funny, sweet, brilliant, wealthy. And my God, did he have some wonderful phrases. You can't teach that dog to hunt. And, you can fix ignorance a little bit, but stupid, that's forever. You can't fix stupid. Stuff like that. He was kind of a little bit say whatever you want kind of guy, which of course most of us wouldn't do, but I just adored it. And it was kind of a funny show, very much a humor show. Maybe let me know in the comments if you ever watched it. I think it started, 10 years ago, maybe 2014, 2015. And the kids were much, much younger than they are now. Like little Grayson, I think he 6 years old. 8 years old, something really quite young, very much a young little boy. And then there was Savannah, who's the daughter, and she's a little bit older than Grayson. I think she's in her 20s now, because Grayson's, I think, 17 or 18. And then her brother was older, and I think, Chase, he's 30 now. And then he has another daughter, I think Lindsay, and I don't know how old, maybe 35. She's older, right? She's quite a bit older. And I believe Julie is their mother. Don't quote me on it. I have the memory issues, but I think it's Julie. And they're just so in love, And it's just so beautiful to see people in love. And she's just such a beautiful person, such a loving mother, such a caring friend, just so wonderful. And, and they have a few sort of spats. And then there's Nanny, who you love, because that's what we called my grandmother. The woman that was, You know what I mean? She, not my actual grandmother, but that's what we called her. We called her Nanny. And I love my nanny, and I think my nanny loved me. So I always think about my nanny when they're talking about like their nanny, the grandmother to the kids, the grandkids. Like, I think it's Todd's father. No, Todd's mother, not father. Todd's mother. And then, of course, we don't find out Julie's parents because they were never in the show, I don't believe. And that's her parents. And they used to live in South Carolina, I believe. And then there's another boy, I think Kyle, maybe from another marriage. I'm not sure. And he was not doing well. Even they talk about it. He was an addict, and you know, he had, I think, trouble with just managing his life, and he would do really bad things. I don't know if he was in jail or not, but he really was a ne'er-do-well. And then he had a baby with a black woman, I believe she was. And so then he has this little girl, Chloe is her name? Yeah, I think it is. Who obviously came from a very poor beginning. Like, stock is a real thing, right? You know, the ability to have good genes is a real thing. That's why I'm still here, because I had amazing genes. Awful parents, but amazing genes. That's why I can still do everything. So it's a nature-nurture thing, and you can really see that in Chloe, too, because she's had everything, but she isn't everything, right? You have to watch the show to see what I mean. So it's kind of, you know, a philosophical point. And that just because Julie and Todd have kids doesn't mean they're good kids all the time. Like, just because they're wealthy, they maybe weren't born wealthy. So you can see that some of their kids have had serious, emotional or, you know, legal issues. So God, it's just such a fascinating show. So Chrisley Knows Best was on for a very long time. If I remember rightly, I think it was still on when they were, you know, being indicted, when they were, you know, going to go to jail. I think that's why they stopped doing it. So I think that's pretty much everybody from the original show, right? And, you know, I believe Todd was in real estate. I'm not sure what Julie actually did. They had like a lot of kids, so she might have just looked after the kids, which is perfectly wonderful. In fact, if more people did that, there'd probably be better kids, right? So, but she might have had a job too, because God, it was like 10 years ago. I kind of stopped watching it. But then my heart broke for them when they were going to jail, because it didn't seem like they were going to jail for any real reason. You know, like they didn't seem to, you know, like I couldn't believe that they did all the things that they said that they did. They just didn't seem like criminals to me. Although I guess one can say, what does a criminal look like? But not that. So, you know, so I followed the story, and then to be so brutally, you know, accused of things and then convicted, like on trumped up charges, which made no sense, just kind of really made me so sad. And how they were separated, and he went to some, I think, kind of work camp, and she went to some seriously scary-looking prison, even though it was minimum security. I think it was very old and decrepit and like some kind of horror movie. I think he might have had a little bit of an easier time of it, but still, it probably wasn't that nice a place either. So, you know, so I tried to keep track of it, and then when you know, President Trump said he was going to pardon them, I was so happy for them, because I didn't think they belonged in jail anyway, you know. Plenty of people really don't belong in jail. Not that that matters, right? People just do stuff sometimes to people. And then you find out that the reason why they were in jail was both their children conspired to accuse them of things that were not true. And for whatever reason, the law believed them. The police believed them. The lawyers believed them. It wasn't really even true. It was just, you know, it was lies, right? Because they wanted to get them back for something. I don't know what they wanted to get. I mean, they were treated pretty well. I mean, they're rich. So anyway, you find that out. And it's just so heartbreaking, because you're like, their own kids are the reason why they were in jail for 2.5 years. So it ended up being really sad, I guess. And I wasn't expecting it to be sad. I was kind of expecting it to be kind of funny, I'm not funny, because obviously they had this awful ordeal, but wonderful because they get out of jail and they're going to talk about, getting out of jail and, getting back to their lives and everything. But that's not really what happened. So that's what I wanted to talk about. And if their trauma traumatized them to that degree, what did my trauma do to me? Which really makes me think about Jesus even more, because he's the reason I'm still here. You really don't survive what I survived, at least in one piece. And I did. And the more I find out about what trauma actually does, what it actually does to people, it seems like a miracle, like a extraordinary point. I was meant to stay here. I was meant to be alive. God was making a point that, you're meant for bigger things, for greater things than what you endured, which really comforts me so very much, because as you can well imagine, dealing with this trauma is so very brutal. Alone too, right? Because my family didn't want me to have anything or be anything, so I don't, right? I don't have a family. I don't have friends anymore because they just keep betraying me. You all know who you are. They just keep it. I don't do anything to them, but they just keep my gifted friends, my church friends, my minister. Damn, that's just all. See you later, Cheryl. Okay, whatever you want to do. But then, God is closing one door and opening a whole bunch of doors. So, I'm very, very blessed, even though I'm sad. Obviously, my pretend family, and of course, I've never been allowed to have my own husband, my own kids. So that's been a very big deal. It's got in the way of being a servant to everybody. So I was really just so amazed at the Chrisleys' life. They had this, I think they lived in Georgia, maybe not, but about 10 years ago, they had this amazing house. And I think they had a pool, and it was like a mansion, and they were so crazy wealthy. And it was just basically the life of these people and all the funny things. Because I think, all the kids are still in school. Not Lindsay. I think Lindsay had her kids already, and she was, she would come in. But yeah, they didn't really get along with Lindsay, so she didn't stay very long. And the nanny kind of reminded me of my nanny a little bit, although much more wealthy and enjoys the casino. I don't think my nanny ever went to one. She was more simple, but she grew up in the Depression and stuff, so that's pretty intense, right? She really struggled. She had a hard time, my nanny. But she did amazing, beautiful things, and she loved me, so that's wonderful. So it was just lovely to see all this abundance. Grayson had all these toys and all these opportunities and went to a really good school, and they just seemed to have a lot of fun together. They had this beautiful kitchen, and it was so huge, and they would hang out in it, and they would make things, and Todd was just lovely, and Julie was just like your mom. I never had a good mom, but you can imagine a mom would be, and they would make food together, and they would go on big trips together. I remember this one time they went to this amusement park, and God, it was funny. And it was just wow, what is it like to have a family? I would kind of imagine what that might have been like to have that, because we didn't have that and have it. You could see the brewings of some problems, though, even back then, right? Chase, who was the, not eldest boy, but I think almost, if you don't count Kyle, he had quite a lot of trouble even back then. He was quite spoiled. He was quite selfish. He was quite narcissistic already. He was very lazy. He was happy to be in the show, happy to go and do things, but he didn't want to ever help. He just wanted to enjoy this luxury that he was living in. And they talk about that in the new show too. But everybody else was pretty good, little Chloe, obviously was having some trouble, but you have to understand the trauma that she came from. I mean, she came from a very dark place. So, they were so good to her, which is wonderful. They actually adopted her so that she didn't end up in an orphanage because neither one of them could look after her anymore. So they're actually raising their granddaughter, such as it is. And if you've seen the show, you know what I mean. So generous of them. And yeah, so that's kind of the story. And so, they get out. It's so beautiful that they get out. And then I think it was Lifetime. I'm not sure if it was Lifetime. I get all these channels now because it's really easier just to get the whole package of channels than to try to pick the channels because it's not any cheaper because you're not really paying for the TV anyway. You're paying for the internet, which is like $150 a month or something if you're paying for Lightning internet, which, as people might remember, I used to be an online college teacher and I needed the Lightning internet. But I ain't anymore. So it's okay. All good things are happening. All good things are happening. And I know I'm going to get a better job. So everybody, help me think good things about my new job. Because that's what's coming. So, and it's going to be amazing. So, yes. So, again, spoilers ahead. If you haven't seen it, it's called The Chrisleys Back to Reality. It's been on, though, for a few weeks now. It was eight episodes run in 2-episode blocks for 4 weeks. So it was like 2 hours, like a 2-hour show for the last 4 weeks. And at least I think it was. Yeah, it was so good, but it was so sad. So here's where the sort of philosophical, cerebral part really does come in. The first episode is all about Savannah, trying to get her parents free, trying to help her parents, trying to do everything. You catch up with them because it's been a long time. Chase is a mess, like a real mess. He's on drugs. He can't do anything. He's depressed. He can't eat anything because his stomach's messed up. And, you get kind of feel for him. He lives with his maternal grandparents who were supposed to come out and help, but really didn't do anything. And then he didn't do anything. So he hid out with his grandparents in their apartment, right? When they were supposed to help raise Grayson and Chloe, who were still quite young, but they didn't, and that's the whole story is they talk about how absolutely awful her parents are. Like, they are just awful people. The grandfather is like crazy and weird and a whack job. Like, he's just not a kind person, not friendly, almost scary in his psychopathy, right? Almost scary. Like, you're like, what is wrong with you? And her mother is just useless. I mean, I'm sorry. There's no other way to put it. She's just helpless. It's like she's never had to do anything in her life, but she probably hasn't because her daughter, being so beautiful, has probably looked after them or something. So she was useless. She couldn't do anything. So they didn't. They just didn't help. All of 2.5 years, they made Savannah do everything. And that is so awful, right? They made her she had to look after her 2 younger siblings. She had to keep the house. She had to, go and get jobs because, of course, they're not making money now. They're in jail. So she had to try and get jobs that would help keep them. It was really frightening. Like, I remember she used to be on a couple of TV shows because, of course, they had some cachet. Like, so she could get jobs. She would get jobs. And then, they had podcasts and, I think she had other kinds of things on YouTube and stuff. So that made her some money. But still, it's pretty frightening to make. I think she was in her early 20s at that point. So that was really hard on her. Like, she went from being sort of this, wealthy, privileged kind of teenager to like, oh my God, now I'm a guardian for everybody and I have to earn the money. And no one would help her. Nanny didn't help either, which I am really horrified at because I thought she was a better person than that. Turns out, no, she isn't. So really, really surprising kind of stuff come out. So that's kind of what they talk about. And they talk about how Chase doesn't like anybody and won't talk to anybody. And Grayson is kind of grown up, kind of wild because she did her best. But of course, she's not their mother. He looks kind of like, kind of like a scraggy hobo guy. I'm just saying it. He really does. Like he's got a beard and he looks unkempt, right? He's unkempt, as they say. But, she did what she could do. And of course, Chloe is not doing well at all. I think they had trouble even concluding her because she can't even talk properly. I think obviously she was very traumatized when her, her mother, her grandmother really, was just taken away from her so viciously. So you can see how upset that is, how much it's given her psychological challenges, right? And the whole family has serious psychological challenges. And poor Savannah, she had to be the strong one for everybody. And so that's kind of what happens. And they're talking about sort of their lives and what goes on. So that's kind of the first session. And then the second one is again, she's getting closer to getting them home. She talks about how she's doing it. I think Trump has been elected, so she thinks maybe there's a chance that they can get, freed. So she's going everywhere, anywhere anybody will, all kinds of ambassador dinners at the White House, talking to anybody in the State Department, in the White House that would talk to her, the prison people, anybody that would talk to her. So, that's exhausting. And she talks about what it's like to visit. They visited her mother, and it was not a nice place. It was very decrepit, very run down. The air quality was bad. I don't think she was treated very well. So, even though it's supposed to be minimum security, it was really like a scary movie. And you can see the photos of it. You can see the pictures of it if you watch the show. It looks like some kind of horror movie. They didn't really visit their dad very often because he was so far away. I think they did a few times, but I think she was a little bit closer and the dad was farther. Because I think she was in Kentucky and he was in Georgia. Although I don't know much about the South. But yeah, so I don't think they visited him as often. But they talked about what it was like and how they missed them and, the different sort of things that happened, in their experience. So Savannah was maybe going to counseling and they wanted Chase to go, but he wouldn't go. And just how immature he was. Every time someone brought up something he didn't like, he said, "I'm getting mad." And then he'd run away like he was 8 years old. Like, that is not good mental health there. He was either they painted him awful or he really was awful. And that was sad because she could really use the help and she didn't get it. And sort of like the how she raised her siblings, how Grayson was, I think, in university now and sort of the stuff that happened and how Chloe was like a teenager and wouldn't listen to her at all. But that's what teenagers do, young teenagers. They don't want to listen to anybody. So she kind of ran wild a little bit, did her own thing. And how much everybody missed them, though. That kind of thing. So it was kind of sad but beautiful. And, you got the feeling that maybe they were going to get released. And then they do. In the third episode, they get released. And God, it was beautiful. God, it was so wonderful. Like they were, they weren't wanting to release them in a way. It wasn't the White House, but there's all these different levels of bureaucracy. And they didn't want to release them. And so it took a while. And there's this whole big thing about how long it took for them to get them released. And it was just fascinating how that happened. And she was so brave. God, she's like my level brave. Like, the stuff I've had to do. And so they did. The president, she actually talked to the president when he was signing all the other pardons. I think at the White House, he signed pardons for them, unconditional pardons. And so they were able to go. And apparently they had to let them go the same day. So they drove all the way to, I think it was somewhere in Georgia, somewhere in Kentucky, maybe. It was a long time. And it took a long time for them to, sign the paperwork and then, release them. So they're there all day. And there's a bit of a controversy because they didn't take Chase, because they didn't want to take Chase with them. He was such a problem. And I mean, it was already such a stressful thing. Because there's media everywhere. She hasn't really seen her dad in a really long time. And yeah, she used to see her mom once in a while, but still, she is very upset because this is a very hard thing to put a girl through. Like, she's just a young girl. What is she, like 20 something? She's not that young. She's not that old. So she goes with her friend, and they go to pick her dad up. And then Grayson goes with, I think, his cousin and some of their friends to pick up their mom. And it's just so beautiful how they did it. She even called, the director of prisons, because the prison was like, dragging their feet about letting her go. And so she had enough, and she did this big press conference. And so she thought maybe if she could press them a little bit, because it looked really bad. And so she did. They did this big press conference, pushed them, about how they wouldn't release her. And, and then she called the director of prisons, and the director of prisons is like, yeah, I don't know why that is. We have the paperwork. So then I think he called them, and he's like, yeah, what is wrong with you? You let that woman go now. Now let her go. So they do. And God, you can just see it. It's so beautiful and sad, though, because this is some scary, scary shite, right? This is not fun. She comes through this tunnel, which is all like kind of barbed wiry or like chain link fencing. And these scary looking people come out with her. Like, these people are not nice looking people. And so she hugs Grayson, and then she's like, let's go. She looks genuinely like startled, upset, euphoric, though, at getting out. Like, she doesn't even believe it that much. She's like, let's go, because she's just so traumatized, right? So then they leave, and it's so beautiful, right? She's so happy that she's in the car, and then they're driving. Todd, textbook Todd, he has a bit of a different situation, because he didn't have that big, scary, really old prison. He had some kind of like weird work camp. So it looks like some kind of camp with like lower buildings, like dorms or something. And so he came out, and you could see him. And then those people actually didn't look that scary. They looked all right. They didn't look that scary. And you could see the beautiful sort of smile on his face when he saw his daughter. And then they kind of ran. They were hugging. She's crying. He's crying. I'm crying. We're all crying. And it was so beautiful. And then he gets in the car, and he can't believe it either. And then, they're like, what's it like? You're free. You're out. And God, it was so beautiful. Such a beautiful thing. And then they go to Pizza Hut. And it's just, I'm trying to imagine how beautiful that must be. You haven't been out, you haven't been able to do anything for 2.5 years, and then you stop at the Pizza Hut, and hopefully it was good and people didn't ruin it for him. You know what I mean? We want to eat your food. We want to eat food, not hear screaming. Or maybe that's just me. You want to eat your food. So hopefully he had a good experience, although it's probably loud in prison, so maybe he didn't mind. It's my PTSD talking. So he was talking about the different pizzas he had. And then he talked to his wife, and they had not seen each other in 2.5 years. So they did, oh God, what's the name of that video? I can't remember. WhatsApp. I think they might have WhatsApped or something. And it was they're crying. It's so beautiful that she sees him and he sees her on the video call, and God, it was beautiful. It was so wonderful, and that they were going to come. But, it's hours away, right? So it takes a long time for them to come back. And just sort of the beautiful story about getting back and getting there. And then the ugliness ensues. And I want to talk about the ugliness. So all the people that are in the house, right, waiting for them are now all kind of cranky because they didn't get their way. Because they didn't bring the other grandparents because they are useless and stupid, and they were just gonna ruin it. Like they both knew that they were gonna ruin it, and they didn't want their parents to be upset by these people who have no ability to behave themselves or monitor their language at all. Watch the show. So they're mad that they didn't get to go, and Nanny's mad that she didn't get to go, and then you find out that Nanny doesn't really like anybody else. All she likes is Chase. She doesn't like Grayson. She doesn't really like anybody. She really doesn't like Savannah, because Savannah isn't doing what she says all the time. And, that's not unusual, especially in the South and other places. Heck, even in Canada, the firstborn boy was always, idolized, while everybody else got the, as they say, crap end of the stick, so, but still it's sad because you think Savannah did everything, and then this whole big chat about how she didn't really do everything, and we'll let her pretend she did, and it was just ugly. It was ugly, the two of them talking about, about it. It was just awful, because I used to like Nanny. And so that's sort of what happened. And then they showed up, and it was such a beautiful thing when Todd got to come back to his own garage, right? And he's like looking around, and then everyone's hugging him, and everyone's crying, and they're so happy. Chase is there, so happy. And Chloe's there. She missed her dad and all that stuff. And it's this beautiful thing when, so he's there, and I think he got there first. I'm not sure. And so he's sort of walking around, and they bought them presents, and they decorated the house. It's so beautiful, and, so lovely. And anyway, and so she comes, and they hug. They haven't seen each other in 2.5 years, and they hug, and they're crying, and you can only imagine how much that must have meant to both of them, that they hadn't been together. And they'd been married for 30 years or something. So at that point, so that was just so evil to do that to them, to make them so far apart from each other. It was just really punitive, man. So, and then, Todd in his funny way is kind of like he's looking forward to having sex again. Which he probably is, because he hasn't had it. And he makes a point of how they're not allowed, I don't think they're allowed to color their hair in prison. So her natural color is kind of like gray or something. Or they're not allowed to color it that much. So it was kind of like brown. And he's like, I ain't never dated a brown haired girl in my life. I don't know if I can start now. And so, God, it was just funny. And so, because she had dark brown hair, right? So that's kind of the funny thing. But just the beautiful thing, you see them in their backyard, and just knowing that they're so happy to be home. And that's kind of the sort of different story and what happened. And then not everybody is nice to them. Not everybody is kind to them in a way. Like, her father, I think, says stupid stuff. That's me. And Chase basically tells her to go back to prison because she says something he doesn't like. Yeah, that's a little mental, actually, this poor woman. And because you don't get what you want, because she's trying to find out what's happening with you, you want her to go back to prison. That's just so awful. So, stuff like that happens. And then, and then there's sort of, and then it kind of, I didn't know it was only 8 episodes, and then it kind of wraps up. And you just, it's sad. You think it's going to be happy, and it's not happy. Julie is really traumatized, way more than anybody thought, by what happened. And she's trying to pretend she's not, but she's got some serious PTSD issues, right? Because from what I understand, she had a pretty good life. I mean, reasonably good. So she was very shocked, obviously, to go to that, and they were really not good to her. They weren't polite to her, and they were quite, I think, pretty mean to her, actually, there. And so that was pretty traumatic. Although she made some good friends, she said. And she was a mother to a lot of the women that were there. And so that she's really struggling with being, with everybody else now, because it was kind of a small building they were stuck in. And they never really went anywhere else. So you get used to sort of being in this small space. So she's really struggling with that. Todd seemed to be taking it much better. I think he didn't have as bad an experience. He's pissed off, right, as well he would be, because that was a total railroad job. They didn't deserve to be in jail, so he's going to do something about it. So they're doing press conferences, and they're talking about the show that they're going to do, and he seems to be managing a little better, but she is not managing very well. And then the kids are not handling it as well as you think. They were used to having a lot of freedom, So Chloe and Grayson are not very happy now that their mother is back telling them what to do. Because, as much as Savannah tried to do that, she wasn't really their mother. And she was so busy doing everything else, too. Right? And it all kind of, as they say, hits the fan when they all find out that the people that were supposed to help Savannah really didn't help her. And, and they're trying to lie about it a little bit. So they are really I got the feeling they were mad that they made Savannah do everything by herself and just abandoned her, which is exactly what they did. So, you kind of see all this happening, and Savannah, now that she can let her burden down, is pretty mad, I think. I don't think she's terribly happy about everything that people made her do. So that was my view anyway. And again, Chase is just being an idiot, he's got this bimbo girlfriend, he's going to marry, probably because he wants to run away from his responsibilities and, his family, because I think she lives somewhere else or something. But anyway, so he's useless. And not only that, he's all uppity, right? And, like somehow everybody else's fault. No, it isn't. So they kind of talk about trying to get along, and then Nanny's fighting with them because they're trying to get along, and they're not getting along at all. And so it's sad, right, that they're not getting along. And, everyone's just having a much harder time coping with everything, and then they're trying to sort of become more of a family, but they just can't. Like, they're even doing some of the, talk shows, and they don't even invite Chase because he's too much of a problem to be around. And sort of that's kind of what's happening. And you just feel sad kind of for them, because it's been a really big traumatic, way more than anybody thought. And it really did make me think about my own trauma and how I'm even here still. If that bothered them that much, and I went through like 50 years of this. 50. And yet I'm still here, and I'm still able to talk to you. I don't know. God is good all the time. God is good. So that's kind of where I am. And I really do realize that my life has some kind of purpose too. More than just being, a servant to the wicked, like evil people's squeak toy. So that's what I'm looking forward to as we move along in this life, that, hey, I get a life now, maybe I get to do something. So it kind of wraps up with Chase going to rehab, which he'd already, I believe, been in once. Because, of course, poor Todd, he went through this with his other son. I believe his name was Kyle. And then, of course, Chase gets uppity again. Well, you're perfect and whatever. Todd wasn't having it. He's done it already. And so he shipped him out to what seemed like a really nice rehab. And then the end of the show is him coming back from the rehab. And I think he actually got a little bit of it out of it, hopefully. I think he realized. And then you can see that Savannah now is going to go live her life, probably. She didn't really get much of a life, or, she's in her 20s, and I think she's going to want to do something. And on top of it, her beloved, Nick, I think his name was, died in a motorcycle accident. So the woman, I think she was going to, no, the man, she was going to marry. So she's really had a hard time. So I think she's probably not going to be home that much. I think she's probably going to travel, go out, sow her wild oats, do whatever she wants now, because she wasn't able to do that. And her useless parents moved back to South Carolina because they didn't do the job they were supposed to do. So they weren't going to stay in Nashville because, Todd wasn't very happy with the fact that they didn't do what they were supposed to do, and Julie wasn't either, I don't think. So they moved. They hightailed it back to South Carolina. And, of course, everybody else is kind of everybody else at this point, right? Nanny is Nanny. She's obviously she has her own place. She's going to live there. And so, and we don't know what's going to happen to Chase. We don't know if he gets to live with them again or he's going to live somewhere else. We don't know. And I guess Chase and Grayson and Chloe are obviously going to have to toe the line now. They're going to have to do what they say again. So they're not going to be happy with that. And I thought it would be sort of a happier show, and it really wasn't. It was really sad. But powerful about family dynamics, and how just because you're rich doesn't mean you're good, or just because you have a lot of money doesn't mean things can't happen to you. People are still people, right? So that, I think, is part of the thing I'm me. I'm here too because I'm me, because I'm determined, because I want to be here, because I want, so I'm more like Savannah in that way. Whereas my sister, for example, is very much like Chase. I mean, she's had everything in her life and she is so messed up. She's living in some kind of shelter home now. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, she is not doing well and she had everything. I had nothing but abuse and, really, really awful, kind of cruel, kind of obsequious kind of experiences. And here I am living my life trying to get a life. So, that kind of thing. So it depends on who you are as well. That's what I meant before, as in, it's not where you come from, it's where you're going. Because I didn't come from a very good place, but I am very, very awesome. And so I was born that way, right? And she really wasn't. You should have seen my mother. You wouldn't believe me. So yeah, it was not a good thing. Kind of like the Cast of Deliverance. If anybody's seen that movie, I grew up that way. 180 IQ, amazingly gifted, sensitive, kind, wonderful, highly sensitive person, Cast of Deliverance. Look it up. So, but here I am. They didn't end me. There you go. I'm still here. So, that's my cerebral TV chat, I guess, for today. And definitely check it out, though. Well worth a watch, especially if you like the Chrisleys, like I do. So everybody, have a good day, and we'll see you again.